Welcome back to another episode of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah, and today I am going at it alone. JP and Christian are not available to me tonight. JP has been out for some time for anybody that's been listening to the show over the past few weeks, and Christian is in the process of moving, so he couldn't make it tonight either. I did want to get an episode out because this is really the last checkpoint, I think, before stuff really starts to ramp up. I mean, I'm recording this on Thursday night, and the Sabres, they play Saturday. So Sabres hockey is back. It's fully back because the Prospects Challenge wrapped up this past weekend, which I'm going to briefly touch on. And yeah, preseason games are about to ramp up. The season's less, I think, is it less than 2 weeks away? It's just over 2 weeks away. And yeah, this is really exciting time. So as always, welcome back to the Sabre Roundtable, where we'll talk to you about all things Buffalo Sabres hockey and even a little bit of the wider NHL. So as I hinted at a little bit right there, what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to give you a quick Prospects Challenge recap, very brief, before moving on to the Peyton Krebs extension that we got just before training camp opened, some storylines coming out of training camp heading in, and we'll touch on the wider NHL, which has also been pretty busy now that teams are officially back on the ice. All training camps are open, and we're almost there, folks, just a few weeks away. So, to get right into it, we'll briefly touch on the Prospects Challenge. This year, the Sabres went 1-2. They opened with a win against the Columbus Blue Jackets, won that contest 3-1. Then their second game against the New Jersey Devils, despite really outplaying them for the most part. I think the final shots were 34-14. They lose that one 5-2. And then in their final contest, Pittsburgh defeats them 8-5. Right off the bat, the biggest storyline, as we know, coming out of that, it's Jiri Kulich. 5 goals in those 3 games. And that's really the Prospects Challenge he needed to have. He had to build some momentum going into training camp, and that's exactly what you got. Kulich isn't the dominating puck possession type of player. I think, as we know, he is a finisher at heart, but even then, you can tell he has nothing to gain from those types of games. You know, players in that tournament, they're looking to stand out, looking to make a name for themselves. Kulich's kind of above that. He just did his thing, and he did it in good fashion. I mean, yeah, he had a couple power play goals, but he also had, I think, 3 of them were even strength. And the one, I mean, he dazzled by the entire Columbus defense and deked their goalie out of the crease. And that's just the type of level that he's at right now. He doesn't really need to impress at these prospect challenges, but it's very, very encouraging that he got to this point. He put up the numbers he needed to in that tournament. And now heading into training camp, as you've seen from the groups, not to jump ahead too much, but he's really the only Amherst that is, or at least prospect, that is being given the chance to make the team. And it's because of that performance. Now, those last 2 games did sort of get kind of out of hand. The second game, like I said, they outplayed the New Jersey Devils, and it just was one of those games they just couldn't find the back of the net. But that last game against Pittsburgh, it did kind of get out of hand, as you heard, 8-5. But they were down 2 of their regular defensemen by the start of Game 3. Norin Pinocha and Jack Bodine both went down after Game 2 with an upper body injury. So they actually had to add Robert Kalisti from the ECHL to their roster just for that game. And even then, they only dressed 5 defensemen. So I think you can kind of see that caught up to them. Other observations, that Osland, Hellenius, Wahlberg line was buzzing for all 3 games. And I think, did they only have the 1 goal late in Game 3? I could be wrong, but those 3 look great together as a trio. I'm excited to see if they keep that together in Rochester, because they very well could have something there. And yeah, all 3 of those guys, they look great. Wahlberg and Hellenius especially. Wahlberg, once again, just being Mr. Eye Test himself, someone who just seems to always have the puck in the offensive zone when he's out there. And same thing with Hellenius. I mean, he just looks so calm and collected out there, while at the same time being able to like open up some passing lanes effectively, which is what you saw on the Wahlberg goal late in Game 3 against Pittsburgh. So those were like my main takeaways. Obviously, Kulich is the story of the tournament. You know, Rosén did his thing as usual. You know, he didn't have the standout performance that Kulich did, but he didn't look behind. So encouraging stuff. The big guys came to play for the most part. I liked what I saw out of Komarov as well. Ryan Johnson did his thing. Nikita Novikov. Nothing really bad to report on any Sabres prospects. Nothing to really make you worried about any of their big guys. So, moving on, we can touch on the Peyton Krebs situation. So with the conclusion of that tournament, Peyton Krebs had still not been signed. We were less than 24 hours away from the Sabres taking the ice on training camp and Krebs not being a part of that. And that would have been really, really weird, really strange, would have put him behind the 8 ball and would have just made you ponder even more what exactly is taking so long. But as we would see, the situation would have a resolution. Peyton Krebs back with the Sabres. He signs a 2-year deal with an average annual value of $1.45 million per season. In 2026, he will be arbitration eligible. So, at first glance, that seems like a lot. At least when you consider the alternatives or the comparables that had been signing contracts in the days leading up to Krebs signing himself. It was something that I was keeping an eye on and trying to keep up with, just seeing all the RFA forwards in the NHL, just seemingly deal after deal signing 1 year, $800K sort of contracts. I mean, Arthur Kaliev, 1 year, $825K. Philip Tomasino, 1 year, $825K. Jonathan Berggren, 1 year, $825K. And then Nick Robertson, 1 year, $875K. All of those guys producing more than Krebs and being in a higher up in the lineup role. So it's kind of surprising that that's the final dollar amount. You know, it's not bad. It's never going to be bad. It's $1.45 million, but it's strange. It's basically double all of those salaries, and I don't think we really have a clear reason for it, although I do have some ideas. I mean, my thought throughout this whole process was, and I think when Christian and I had talked about this in the past few episodes, it's when we were trying to decipher what exactly was taking so long. I think I was just kind of spitballing, and I said, like, maybe Krebs wants 2 years, and maybe the team is willing to give it to him, or maybe they're not. Maybe they want like a 2-way deal in one of those years. I don't know. But as you can see, he ends up getting the 2-year deal, and like I said, it is strange that that's what he ends up getting. He's able to get more money out of that. But I think throughout this whole process, it's just sort of like the Sabres. My theory is that they just wanted him to sign his qualifying offer, which was probably something in a similar salary range to the rest of the RFAs that I laid out. But he just wasn't willing to do that. And he also his camp probably saw the $8.5 million sitting behind Kevyn Adams, going like, well, why can't we have a larger share of that? There's really nothing preventing you from handing that out. I mean, say what you want about some of the other players I listed, but all of those teams are up against the cap. Seattle, or Detroit, who, sure, they signed Berggren first, but after the Raymond and Seider extensions, on top of the Berggren extension, I think they have $200K in cap space. Same thing with Nick Robertson. The Leafs barely have any cap space. And Nashville were big spenders in the offseason. And I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure LA's near the top as well. So all of those guys are kind of helping out their teams in that process, and it makes sense. Those GMs can walk in and say, hey, we don't have the cap space to really give you all you want, sign a 1-year deal, and we can revisit next year. Whereas Krebs is smiling across the negotiating table, being like, what's another 800K? Why can't I get more per season? I'm hitting the reset button with Lindy Ruff this year. I think you guys will get good value even if you give me that raise. So that's my guess. My guess is they just try to take advantage of the salary situation that the Sabres were in. And if that's the case, hey, they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves because I'm going to try and go the whole episode talking about any sort of internal cap because there's way too much to talk about. We don't need to focus on that. But in the scenario that Krebs, that's what him and his agent did, I wouldn't be surprised if the Sabres and Co. kind of did that to themselves by having that much money available. Additionally, at Kevyn Adams' press conference prior to the start of training camp, obviously he was asked about this contract situation, and a question that was asked, pondering about the length that these negotiations went, Kevyn Adams kind of had an interesting soundbite. He said, I don't think it needed to take that long. You'll have to ask his guys, as in the Peyton Krebs camp. So they kind of thought this should have been wrapped up much sooner. We can only speculate if there was a different deal on the table. Maybe Kevyn Adams went up to that extra year in the multi-million-dollar range, or maybe they were standing firm for that qualifying offer, which I feel like is more likely. But either way, this negotiation wasn't cut and dry, which I think we all got that impression given that this was done the day before training camp opened. So, it's not a great soundbite. And additionally, as it was pointed out, Peyton Krebs isn't the only player that is repped by this agent. He's specifically repped by Kevin Epp of Titan Sports Management, who also reps Bowen Byram. And if you've been paying attention, he's up for another contract next summer. So, yeah, those negotiations could get interesting, and whatever happened in the Krebs negotiations could be laying the groundwork for any sort of potential standoff that we see next summer. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully this was just a weird scenario. Krebs' camp just trying to take advantage of that cap situation, which hopefully isn't around next year. I would really hope it's not. But we shall cross that bridge when we get there. And Peyton Krebs is a Sabre for the next 2 seasons. Now we can get to training camp. Training camp is open. Lindy Ruff is back on the ice as a member of the Sabres organization, wearing royal blue gear, and I have to say it does look and feel right. And with all the hope and excitement that Sabres fans had heading in to the first day of training camp, Rasmus Dahlin, first player on the ice. Here we go. We're so ready for this. Let's get Sabres hockey back on. And it comes out a few minutes later that he got off the ice before drill started. Yeah. And then moments later, when drill started, newly signed Peyton Krebs laid a body check on Tage Thompson, and apparently Tage Thompson was laboring by the benches. Whew, that was only like 5 minutes in, and Sabres hockey is back with a bang. Yeah, it was a hectic I can't even call it a few minutes. Dahlin got hurt after attempting what seemed like a routine pass and didn't participate in the entire practice. And for the next 45 minutes to an hour, yeah, everybody was collectively losing their minds because what the hell? Really? Like a few minutes in, and obviously the Sabres, they told the media and word got out Dahlin wasn't going to come back to practice, and we would have to wait and watch the clock tick before we would hear Lindy Ruff's answer on the situation. And when he got off the ice, when he took the podium, he said that there was no clear updates, but him leaving was just a precaution. It seemed like he hurt something in his midsection area. And Lindy Ruff did give it a smirk. So I guess it was kind of like a sarcastic, like, yeah, he hurt himself, but I guess there was some sort of humor in the situation. I don't know, because the NHL doesn't tell its fans what the exact injuries is. You're only left to speculate. So I guess that kind of calmed some fears, but the next day didn't. I mean, when they took the ice this morning, those fears were not exactly kept calm for too much longer, because when the Sabres took the ice, Dahlin wasn't out there again. And in fact, they brought a replacement over. Ryan Johnson, who was in a different practice group, was brought to the main practice group. So once again, everybody's like, oh no, maybe they got some testing done overnight, and now they're in trouble. Now, oh my God, what if he got, I don't know, what if he tore something? Like your mind's just racing, and the Sabres, by not giving you that update and just Dahlin not being there the next morning, it is worrying. But I guess I shouldn't say he wasn't there, because he did watch practice from the bench. He was wearing a sweatshirt and shorts. So, I mean, at that moment, I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe he's all right. I feel like that's a better sign. If he was if he tore something, he probably would be with like the medical staff, or he would be wearing some sort of cast, or I don't know. The point is, it wasn't a great day and a half of worrying about the next likely captain of the Buffalo Sabres. So once again, we had to wait until Lindy Ruff got off the ice and told us what exactly was going on. And he did have more of an update this time around. He said Dahlin was doing well. He'll miss a couple days of practice, but nothing is too serious. So, exhale. Everybody exhale. I know everybody had read that news. You've heard that news before coming into this, but a collective sigh of relief was heard all around Buffalo hearing that news. I mean, good Lord, if they had to start the season for any stretch of time without Dahlin, that would have been pretty worrying. Although, still crossing my fingers, still knocking on wood a bit, because, despite 2 days of practice, we've only seen him on the ice for all of 5 minutes. So hopefully Dahlin's all right, and hopefully that's the last of any injury scares. Although if anybody was paying attention to what was going on in the third practice session in day 2 of training camp today, there was like a lot of things going on with that group. I mean, it started with Alex Kisakov going hard into the boards, and he had to be checked on by some trainers. Then Simon Pierre Brunet got like a shoulder to the face and had to be checked on by some trainers. And then Anton Wahlberg and Brendan Warren collided, and it brought the practice to a halt. And then finally, Victor Nuchev was sent over Scott Ratzlaff and into the net, and he was sent off the ice with a towel to his face. Like, what the hell's going on? We're 2 days in, and all this shit is happening. Like, what's happening? But it doesn't seem like there's anything serious. It's just, it's a friggin' comedy of errors. I mean, what better way to kick off training camp? What more Sabres way is there? So yeah, that's all the injury scares for now. Fingers crossed. Hopefully nothing happens. But deep breath. It seemed like it was just a minor thing with Tage. We didn't really hear anything. Didn't seem like anything carried over to today. And obviously we're just fingers crossed. Hopefully Dahlin's all right and he just tweaked something. Now we can actually get into some of the juicy stuff, the actual on-ice hockey storylines. And without a doubt, I think the narrative sweeping just anything you're seeing on social media is Lindy Ruff is working these players hard throughout their first few skates. The main NHL group, which is all in one bunch together this time around because they have such a quick turnaround. They have a few preseason games, and then they're heading to Europe next week before playing exhibition game against Red Bull, and then opening the season against the Devils. So all of the NHL guys are in the same group, and Lindy is giving it to him early in practice. I'm sure it's a sight that many Sabres fans are happy to see. Many have been waiting for this type of, you can't even call it accountability. It's just the head coach is just working them hard and just trying to set the tone throughout camp. And it is refreshing. I mean, if you listen to WGR the first day of training camp, as I was, Paul Hamilton was talking on the radio. I think it was to Joe DiBiase, and you could hear Lindy Ruff's voice echoing in the background because Hamilton was on site. And it's weird. I can't remember the last head coach that, I think it was Housley. I think Housley yelled a lot. Granato never really had that presence with his voice, and Ralph Kruger ran the team like it was a country club. So it is refreshing in a sense. I can't lie. It's nice to see them working hard. It's nice to see them, tired. It is, I guess, somewhat refreshing to see some players that are tired on the ice. I guess that makes me sound like an old man. I guess that's where we're at. But yeah, I mean, the first day, the video that was going viral was Lindy Ruff stopped a drill because the players went off sides, was yelling at them, continued the drill, and then told them good job afterwards when they did it right. And then today there was, I believe, a drill, and the players did a line change incorrectly. It was somehow mixed into the drill, and Lindy Ruff stopped the drill, had the players all get on the ice, and they were just doing wind sprints, but they were doing board-to-board sprints, and then when they got back to their starting spot, they all got on the ice and started doing push-ups, which is something I think a lot of hockey players like myself can identify with. I remember those days very much, and it does bring them down to earth a little bit. But yeah, it's like I said, Lindy Ruff is setting the tone. It's a very short leash right now. If they mess up a drill, they're gonna skate. They're gonna have to work extra hard, and obviously over the course of an 82 game season where you're traveling all over the continent, that's gonna be fizzled out. You're not gonna see them getting exhausted from day-to-day practices all the time. It's training camp. They're setting the tone early. They need to get their legs under them. And it's important because, I talked about that quick turnaround from now to the preseason to the actual season starting up. And, I remember last year's preseason, and I don't think it's how the rest of the 82 games went that's really like clogging my memory. They had a bad preseason. I just remember feeling it felt off, right? Zach Benson was, I feel like, the only player like really, really playing well. And look, he was great. Like, he was fantastic. He had the perfect preseason, and that's why he made the Sabres roster, and it was fun to watch him. But aside from that, the only guys I remember doing well, I remember Greenway. I think I was watching him a lot, and I liked what I saw. And then I remember Eric Comrie was like the best goalie in camp. And I think one of the few good storylines was it was the power play. And obviously that didn't carry over to the regular season. But I don't know. Does anybody listening, do you remember? I felt like they were just very off. Like they weren't ramping things up going into the season. And, we saw how that carried over. They had a very slow start. They really didn't get, on the ground and running. They were behind the 8 ball and never caught up. So I think what Lindy's doing, getting the NHL group together early and really setting the tone with the pace of the practices, it's good. Hopefully it pays off, and hopefully we'll see that in subsequent preseason games and heading into the regular season. I did joke with JP and Christian. I think there was one of the videos going around from camp, and in one of the drills, and it panned from the one corner to like center ice and just the practice going on. And I think it was Samuelson. He was like on one knee in the corner while the drill was going on, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you know they're getting worked hard. I mean, you got to remember these are NHL players, like top of the line. This is as good as it gets. The best athletes in the world. If they're on one knee in the corner, then you know they're being worked hard. So very funny stuff. But like I said, a certain crowd of Sabres fans are a lot happier than me to see this. But I'm happy as well. All right, enough with the bag skating. On to some actual storylines relating to the guys on the ice that don't involve injuries. We did get our first bit of lines and pairings. Now, the forward groups, there's a lot of rotating day one, but there did seem to be some formation of lines being assembled, and that carried over to today, and there really wasn't much change. So through the first 2 days of training camp, your top line is Peterka, Thompson, and Tuck. On the second line, you have Benson and Kulich swapping off on the left wing of Cousins and Quinn. Jason Zucker is on the third line with McLeod and Greenway. And then your fourth line, Malmsteen, Lafferty, and Okposo with Krebs in that mix. So Lindy sees the construction of the lineup, I think, very similar to what everybody else thought. Peterka, Thompson, Tuck, that line was rolling at the end of last season, so no need to really touch that. Cousins and Quinn are your anchors on the second line, and obviously that second line left wing spot is pretty wide open. And I think before the prospects challenge, you thought it was going to be Benson or Zucker, but now that Kulich had that really strong tournament, he's in contention for that spot. And it makes sense. If he's going to be in the NHL now, see if he can play in the top six. Like, this is not a guy. He's not making the roster as the 13th, 14th forward. If he does it, they're going to play him in the top six. So, yeah, that second line construction makes sense. If Kulich isn't up to speed, then it probably just goes to Zach Benson, which I think is more than fine. I mean, sure, there's a little risk there, because we've talked about this on here, giving a top six spot to a 19-year-old. I mean, it might not end well, but Benson is very mature for his age. So at the same time, it's probably something he can more than take on. And then, your bottom six is basically how anybody else would have constructed it. It's a mixture of Zucker, McLeod, Greenway, Malmsteen, Lafferty, Okposo, and Krebs. Like, that's your mix. So how we saw these forward additions being utilized into the regular season, basically the Sabres have two different groups of six. You've got your scoring top two lines, and your bottom two, they're there to defend. I mean, the third line can obviously put the puck in the net, with Zucker being on that line and McLeod being a strong play driver. But yeah, as we've theorized the lineup to be built, it seems like we're heading in that direction. So I'm excited to see that first line continue to build chemistry, and I'm excited to see who sticks on that second line. Whether or not, it's not even a question of whether or not, even though that spot should have been filled during the summer, it's still a fun conversation to talk about who's going to fill that spot, especially when it's between two young guys in Benson and Kulich. Now, the defense is where we saw more changes day over day because of the Dahlin news. And on day one, these were your pairs. Bryson was with Gilbert, Samuelson was with Clifton, Byram was with Jokiharju, and it seemed like Power was on his own, but obviously that seemed like a spot that Rasmus Dahlin was supposed to fill. Moving over to today, there was some shuffling. Power was with Byram, Samuelson was with Jokiharju, Bryson was with Clifton, and Ryan Johnson, who had been called up, was playing with Gilbert. So I think there's a stark contrast between the pairs as they were assembled day over day. I think the day 2 pairs are much, much better than the day 1 pairs. First of all, Byram and Jokiharju were seemingly reunited. I mean, like I said, there was a lot of rotating going on that day, but those seem like the pairs that stuck. And Byram and Jokiharju, that cannot be done again. That did not work last season. There is zero reason to revisit that. Plus, Power and Dahlin were seemingly going to be reunited. I mean, I guess we never saw it for sure, but given that Owen Power didn't have a partner, he's not getting scratched like a certain crop of fans might want him to be. It seemed like he was supposed to be with Dahlin, so top loading that top pair. Something I haven't been a fan of, but hey, whatever. It's not like it's a bad pair. It's just the trickle down effects in the lineup that I'm not a fan of. And then, Samuelson, Clifton, like when they played together at times last season, they were fine. They were a fine third pair. And then obviously you got Bryson and Gilbert. Those two are fighting for the 7th defenseman spot. The day 2 pairs, on the other hand, I like a lot more because Byram and Power, that's a good pair on paper. That's something I could get really excited to watch. I think Byram should be with Dahlin, but Dahlin Power, is there really that much of a drop off in terms of talent for Byram to play with? I guess the only thing is he was seemingly listed on the right side, and I think he's been on record as saying he's less comfortable playing on that side, so it would be weird. But I guess, Power, Byram, there's so much movement between those two, and ideally they're both, going to be in the offensive zone for a large share of those minutes. So, there's so much rotating going on. It's not, I guess, the end of the world, but I guess something to keep your eye on if Byram's on that right side. And then, Samuelson, Jokiharju, those are two skill sets that can really complement each other well. Bryson and Clifton, same thing. That was a pair we saw at times last season. And then Johnson and Gilbert, I think it's pretty clear Johnson's not going to make this team out of camp. So yeah, those are your pairs and your lines through the first 2 days of camp. I mean, hey, this episode's going to be put out Friday. As you're listening to this right now, everything could have been switched. Things change fast. Never forget that camp during the COVID season, or the actual COVID season, when it was Jeff Skinner, Eric Stahl, Sam Reinhart, and through the first day of camp, everybody was talking about how good they were and how it was the best line. And then the next day, everybody showed up and they were split up, never to be reunited again. Just another Kruger moment, just lost to history. But it looks like I think the defensive pairs are that's where more changes are going to come. I think the forward group, like I said, we've spent a lot of time looking at what those lines could look like, and they seem to be going in a direction that isn't too surprising. And once Dahlin gets back, we'll see where Ruff's head is at with the pairs. We'll see which one of those, whether it's day 1 or day 2, which pairs seem to stick more. The one thing I did want to circle back to Kulich very, very quickly. There was a quote that Lindy Ruff had after, I think it was the first day of camp, and he was talking about, how the NHL group is together. Basically what I was talking about, how there's a quick turnaround. They're going to Europe next week. They got to get, their feet under them. They got to get up and going right away. And there was an interesting quote where Lindy said he needs his NHL team together now, and he's aware that young guys in the organization that wanted a chance to try and make the team, they're not going to have that chance this preseason. They're just not. Two guys I specifically think of are Roseanne and Johnson. Johnson was only in the main practice group today because of the Dahlin injury. Otherwise, those two are in the other two groups. So that's an interesting approach to this camp. But I do understand it. But one person that doesn't apply to is seemingly Kulich. Like, he's made that cut. He has a chance at making this roster. Kevin Adams said the other day, He said he dominated that prospect camp, and if he shows that he can play in the NHL and really be effective, they're going to make a spot for him. So I think it's really awesome he's getting this chance. But I also do want to say, we know what Zach Benson can do in the NHL lineup. We saw him for 70-plus games last season, and if the Kulich thing doesn't work out, he's going to be on your second line in the top 6. I think what I'm asking for, though, is give him the opportunity that Benson had last preseason. Look, Benson was fantastic. He was. I'm not absolutely in no fashion am I trying to take that away from him. But he was given all the opportunity in the world. From day one of that camp, he was with Tage Thompson and Jeff Skinner. I mean, what two better players to really prove your worth that you can play up to that? Now, I do wonder if that spot had been reserved for Matthew Savoie, possibly, had he not gotten injured in the last Prospects Challenge game last year. And then, if you go off of that train of thought, then maybe he stays on the team and plays the whole season. And, oh my God, maybe he's still a Buffalo Sabre. Doesn't matter. He was hurt. Benson took that spot. He was given all the opportunity, and he friggin' ran with it. I say give that opportunity to Kulich. Now, you don't have to split up the top line, but for this preseason, I would not take Kulich off Cousins and Quinn's wing, unless, it's just clearly he's not there yet, and he's just really not doing much. But give him that Benson tryout. Give him Cousins and Quinn, or even if they want to give Peterka a game of rest, throw him up on the top line with Thompson and Tuck. See if he can do it with talent. He didn't really get that opportunity last year. Maybe he played with Cousins a little bit, but I seem to recall it was Cousins, Peterka, and Roseanne. I think Roseanne had a better shot in that camp and was playing with more talent. And even then, by the end of the camp, it was Olofsson on that line. So give Kulich the opportunity. Let him play with the talent and really give him make this the tryout. I know it's going to be an abbreviated preseason, but screw it. See if he can stick around. See if he can do it. They're taking 27 players to Europe. I would assume he plays in one of the games. I think Kulich, for the sheer fact he's in that group, I think he's going to Europe. He's going to Czechia. It completely makes sense that he's going to maybe play in at least one of those games. I think the decision comes when they come back to the States. And if it didn't go well, then he just gets sent back to the AHL. But use that time. Screw it. It's such, from the preseason to go into the global series, it's such almost like a Mickey Mouse preseason, or just, it's an outlier. It's a weird situation. It's a unique situation. So treat it like that. Worst case scenario, you're coming out of Europe and you're 0-2. It's not good, but you're also playing a Devils team that got a lot better in the offseason. I don't know, use it as a tryout and then make your decision and really finalize your roster once you get back. You're going to have to do that anyways because you're going from 27 players to 23. So I'm hoping Kulich gets that shot. I'm hoping that bumps up to, I hope he gets a shot on the first power play unit. Let's see how that goes. I have questions about putting him and Thompson on opposite sides. I don't know if puck movement would get too stagnant, but, that's another thing. Hopefully Seth Appert has been working on how to implement some more movement and creativity to the odd man advantage this season. So final thoughts, hopefully Kulich gets that shot, and I'm excited to see him more in this preseason. I hope at the very least he gets to play with Cousins and Quinn. So through 2 days of training camp, those are really the main points of emphasis. I'm trying to really remember any other quotes I found interesting. I think Lindy was asked something interesting about the penalty kill, and he said he likes using top guys for the penalty kill, which I think is interesting for this team because, first of all, we know Tage Thompson obviously broke his wrist last year because he blocked the shot on the penalty kill. But also the fact that they signed and acquired so many guys in their bottom 6, all of whom can penalty kill. Ryan McLeod's one of the best penalty killers in the league. Lafferty, Malenstein, Aube-Kubel. That's kind of their thing. But, we saw last year the one thing that he did well, Dylan Cousins was a monster on the penalty kill. So I wouldn't be surprised if that continues. Tage proved he was a great power killer early in the season. And I think post-injury, they just tried to keep him away from there. Had him focusing on his 5-on-5 game and getting healthy again. Alex Tuch's a good penalty killer. Jack Quinn's really good at it. So, obviously Zach Benson is going to be a monster the more he grows into the league. So Ruff's got a lot of options. I'm curious to see what he does there. Something to look forward to. I'm guessing since they play Saturday, we'll see power play units tomorrow on Friday. So, like I said, by the time you're listening to this, maybe they're released, and maybe I sound outdated, but something to look forward to. So, I think other than that, that's all the Sabres talk for this time around. Like I said, I wanted to really check in right before the preseason kicks off and we get to talk about actual hockey games and storylines, who's playing well, who's not, how Lindy's deploying his team, all the interesting stuff. This is the last checkpoint before hockey really begins. So I'm excited. Hockey's back. Hockey's back in nearly full swing. I'm excited to watch preseason games, which I know that excitement's going to go away after the first one, and I'm just going to want the actual season to start, but we're nearly there, folks. We are nearly there. So we'll keep up with training camp. We'll talk to you again as the preseason continues next time, hopefully with my other two co-hosts. But that's all the Sabres roster talk for today. Now, before I get off of the Sabres as a whole, there is something that I'm really excited to talk about because I didn't expect to talk about it now because there had been zero talk about it. Like, at all. There was no announcement. Nothing was said. This was caught by a fan walking by the arena. And as we've seen over the past few days, it seems pretty official. The Alumni Plaza mural is being removed. It's being cleared out. All the panels have been getting taken down. I was actually at the arena this morning, and there's, I believe, 4 rows of panels, making up that mural. And I think all of the bottom 2 had been cleared out. And then most of the top 2, other than a few players in the middle, had been taken out. So, I mean, hey, maybe they're just being cleaned or something for the first time in a decade and they throw them up last minute before the season starts. But I don't think it's a coincidence that, this has been something that, for anybody that's been listening to this show over the past year, 2 years, like we joke about it, but it's true. It become outdated. Tyler Myers was the last updated player on that mural. Then before him, it was guys like Vanek and Pominville. And look, it really ignored basically a full decade of the franchise's history. And it's not that I wanted guys like Jack Eichel or Sam Reinhart on that mural. It's just, it felt old, right? Like the black and white feel, it makes sense. It's Alumni Plaza. You're supposed to feel the history. But given that, geez, as we'll get into, because, well, it didn't even matter because Tyler Ennis wasn't even on that mural. None of the only player still active on that mural was Tyler Myers. So it's weird. It was like a weird relic of history. It wasn't new. It wasn't flashy. It didn't give you any, like when you're walking into a Sabres arena and you look at that, there's nothing from the present team to really identify with. So it needed a change. And I don't know what happens next because there's no announcement for it. I wouldn't be surprised if they just leave it blank for this season, or at least for a little while, and maybe they attack it next summer. But I think I'm okay with just, if it's gone for a year, you know what? It's gone for a year. It's not the end of the world. I'm just glad something's being updated. And then I'll give credit to Pete Gwelly. Like, it's another thing that has really stuck out that they're trying to make the arena better. I will give them credit. The scoreboard looks fantastic. I know the roof hasn't been tested yet, but no leaks. So that's good news. And Alumni Plaza, like, that's something that, there's been consensus agreement that I think there's been consensus agreement that needed to be changed, but it wasn't like verbal outcry, like get this out of here. But perhaps it's just another example of him doing his research and discovering that fans really want to see a change there. So hopefully they do something new with it. I believe before the Plaza was made a thing, I think they just put the current team's team picture there. I could be wrong. I mean, it was so long ago at this point. So I don't think that's a terrible idea, but I've been talking about it for a while. They should just, and they have a great graphics team, or I don't know, hire a third party and do like really some cool, colorful mural, that I don't know highlights the current era of the team, something like that, or maybe I don't know. There's a lot you could do with it. Either way, it was a necessary change. Tyler Myers will miss you. I'm gonna miss you from that mural, but it needed to be changed, and it is exciting that seemingly it's something they're doing heading into opening night. So that's the actual end of Sabres talk. I did just want to slip that in there before moving on to the wider NHL. So with that out of the way, let's hop over to some of the other NHL topics, and we'll start in Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby, the extension that was seemingly never coming, finally came, and surprise, surprise, it came at an average annual value of $8.7 million per season. He's there for another 2 years in Pittsburgh, starting not this season, but the following season. So, any franchise wanting to somehow get his talents away from Pittsburgh, you'll have to wait for a few more seasons. But no surprise, he stayed in Pittsburgh. It would have been absolutely insane if somehow, some way, he did not re-sign there. And obviously, given the guy can still carry a team as he showed last year, it's a good deal for Pittsburgh either way. So good on Pittsburgh for finally getting that done. Next up, more contract news. I mentioned it before, but Detroit was one of the big teams that we were watching heading in to training camp because they had 3 notable RFAs not signed, but 2 most notably, that being Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider. But as I stated, Berggren gets signed for 1 year at over $800K, and then we get to the big 2, first of which was Lucas Raymond. He signs an 8-year deal at $8.075 million per season, and this one I like for the Red Wings. I mean, Raymond showed down the stretch last year just how good he can be, and yeah, like that's the type of contract that I think we can collectively agree that's probably going to age very, very well for the Red Wings if he continues to be a top line right wing. And then Moritz Seider, he doesn't go the full 8. He goes 7 years for $8.55 million per season. So Yzerman gets the job done. Both of the Detroit big RFAs are signed before training camp even begins. Actually, well, Seider was signed. I don't think they took the ice today. Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, they got signed before this became an issue. Unlike someone like Jeremy Swayman in Boston, then that's still a big storyline right now that he hasn't been signed. So Raymond Seider locked up. Now Seider's the interesting one because we touched on it a bit in our Sabres versus the Atlantic episode with Detroit. By the way, go listen to that series. Seider was interesting last season because halfway through there was this big debate. Seider, in terms of advanced stats and even raw counting stats, hasn't really progressed since his rookie season. But if you look at the numbers, he's been deployed in some of the toughest minutes in the NHL. And he's getting a heavy dose of those minutes. So it's almost unfair to be underwhelmed by his play, but fact remains his impacts have not been stellar since his rookie campaign. So this was going to be an interesting contract to see where he fit along the defenseman scale. Was he going to get up into the 9s and maybe the 10s, like with the Rasmus Dahlins of the world? Or was he going to stay in the 8s with like the Owen Powers, the Jake Sandersons of the world? Well, Detroit got him for $8.55, but they did have to sacrifice a year to do so. And the biggest thing coming out of these two contracts is it really seems like Yzerman wants all of their players to make less than Dylan Larkin, who's making $8.7 million. Now, I understand that. He's the best player on that team. Raymond was great last season, and I guess you could have called him the best player on the team last year, but Dylan Larkin's the heartbeat of that team, and it makes sense. They want him to make less than their captain, but it's weird. I wonder if it's going to bite them one day, if maybe one of their prospects breaks out into a phenomenal player in a rising cap world. I don't know. Does Yzerman still try to get him under Larkin? Maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting strategy, and they willingly gave up a year of Seider just to get him under that dollar amount. So, they're really holding firm on this stance, and I guess the bigger storyline is will this Seider contract even pan out? Because Detroit fans, they see all the upside. They're not worried about Seider. They think the hard deployment is the reason he struggled, and that's a fair assumption, but a lot of the advanced stats models, they take that into account, and despite that, he still comes out kind of mediocre to underwhelming. So I don't have a defined position. I haven't watched enough of purely Moritz Seider to know whether or not his bad play is because of the hard minutes. But the numbers, they do sort of speak for themselves. Either way, I think the Detroit Red Wings, they're making themselves worse by doing that. No matter what you think of Seider, stop deploying him like that. I mean, as an Atlantic Division foe, you guys can keep deploying him if he gets worse results as a Sabres fan. I'm not complaining. But, if I was a Red Wings fan, I would be like, stop it. Like, you're minimizing how much he can help the team. So, Detroit, they get Raymond and Seider done, and that wraps up two of the biggest RFAs. Now, everybody's focus just shifts to Swayman, and that situation does not seem to be getting any cleaner. Moving on, we do have some captains news, not for the Sabres just yet, but for the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Anaheim Ducks. The Tampa Bay Lightning named Victor Hedman their next captain of the team, and a move that really surprises nobody. I mean, he is the next guy to Stamkos. I mean, I talked about it a bit on our last Sabres versus the Atlantic episode, how I thought maybe Point was the guy because he's probably going to be around longer term and he's younger. So that was my thought. But yeah, Hedman makes sense. He's like the Marchand to Bergeron, where he's the bridge guy to the next captain as his career slowly comes to a close. So no surprise there for Lightning fans, I'm sure. But then we get to Anaheim, and Anaheim named Radko Gudas as their captain. Very, very interesting decision. Now, Gudas was fantastic for them last season, so I think if they're going off of that, that makes sense. He's one of the few vets on the team that still carries their weight around. But it's interesting. I think at first glance you would have guessed a team like that they would go with like a Mason McTavish, or a few years ago, I'm sure everybody's answer would have been the next captain was Trevor Zegras, but since then we've seen that relationship kind of sour, and overall Zegras doesn't really seem like the most like captain type of player. He's there to do his thing, score fancy goals, smile at the crowd after a goal. I don't know how he is in the locker room. I'm just making jokes, but Gudas does seem like the type of guy that can whip that team into better shape, and good for him. There's not a lot of players in the league that like him that get named captain. Usually it's these franchise players, and I'm sure once Gudas that contract runs out, or if he ever gets traded, they'll give it to another player. My guess is Mason McTavish is the next Ducks captain, but it's cool. It's a good story. You love to see guys like that get to see. But with those two teams naming their captains, that leaves three teams without a captain: Utah, Seattle, and Buffalo. Now, Utah, I think everybody's guess is that Clayton Keller would be the next captain of that team. I don't know. Maybe they go off the board and give it to like Mikhail Sergachev. But with Keller being there for so long, he is essentially that team's franchise player. So I would assume it goes to him. Same thing with Seattle. Maybe they give it to like Jordan Eberle, but I feel like Matty Beniers is like a shoo-in to be the C. And then obviously with the Sabres, we're just waiting for the announcement at this point. Dahlin is going to be the next captain of the team. And the only thing seemingly delaying that announcement is the injury scare that we've had. So stay tuned for that. I wonder if this is a season where every team has a captaincy. I don't know. Stay tuned. Moving on, we did get news about TJ Oshie. It's been rumored for some time if he was going to play next season or not. He is not going to play for the entire 24-25 season due to a chronic back injury. So that's really tough to see. Oshie clearly on the back nine of his career, and you want to see him finish it strong. I think he only played about 50 games last season, and I think had like 20-something points in those games. So it's clear he's not at 100%. And it really sucks to see him have to go on LTIR and deal with this injury. So Washington's going to be without Oshie's services for next season. Moving on, we got news today. Kyle Okposo is finally hanging up the skates. I think we all figured once he won the cup that was the perfect moment to go out on, but it is weird. It took until September 19th. I wonder if he was sitting around all summer and just wondering if there was any spark left in if there was any gas left in the tank. But obviously there wasn't. He put out a nice letter online today, and congrats on the retirement, Kyle. Congrats on the cup win. Go off into the sunsets. It stinks. We've talked about at length his legacy as Sabres captain, and I'll always hold firm that he did his job from 2021 to 2023. He was the perfect guy to lead the locker room into a new era. It just it sucks how it ended. Obviously it wasn't like a big trade request where he went public or anything, but he talked to Kevin Adams. He wanted to chase a cup in the last season of his career, and he went on to do that. He went on to win the Stanley Cup. So that's awesome for Kyle Okposo, the player, for everything that he had been through back in 2016 onwards with all the concussions. I mean, he really shouldn't even. You wouldn't even think he should be playing hockey right now. If you were to go back to 2018 and tell yourself that he was still playing to this day, I think people would be surprised. So for Kyle Okposo, the human, that's awesome. As the captain of the Sabres, I couldn't help but feel a bit slighted that he asked out, but it doesn't matter. He deserved that. Him as a person, he deserved that. Congrats on the retirement, Kyle. I hope time kind of heals the wound that you may have opened up for some people in Buffalo. And then we get to the heartbreaking one. Tyler Ennis, the best to ever do it. Tyler Ennis has announced his retirement from hockey as a whole. He wasn't playing in the NHL last season. I think he was in Europe somewhere. I think he announced his retirement from the NHL back in, January? But now he officially announces his retirement from the game. Just, oh man, I'm getting old. Which is funny because some people listening to me talk out there are probably like, kid, you are nowhere near old. But this is probably one of the few instances where I feel old, because this is a guy where I can go, oh, I remember watching him in his prime 10 years ago. Man, it feels weird. Tyler Ennis. He's one of those players you always think of as young. And he's very much not that. Although I guess in the larger span of life, he is still very young. But if you go by hockey terms, I mean, he's basically ready to be put out to pasture. You hit 34 years old, man. Like, that's it. You're basically walking with a cane throughout life at that point. But good. Happy for Ennis. Happy retirement for him. Another guy that dealt with concussions in his career. So I wish him a happy and healthy retirement. One of my most favorite Sabres to watch when I was younger, from when he was a rookie and onto those tank teams. He was one of the few great players, and I wish I'd gotten to live through an alternate history where the Eichel era didn't have to suffer through a concussion-riddled Tyler Ennis. He was fun. I'll never forget. He was nearly the first NHL player to ever hit the Michigan, and I wish they had called it we were this close. We were this close from it being called the Ennis instead of the Svetch. And God damn it, I hate the Hurricanes so much. It would have been so much better. Such a better history. Oh well, we got the bad ending. So, I think that's all the big news for now. I mean, I can talk about the freaking Robin Leonard saga, but I don't even want to waste my time on that. I guess we want to stay with Vegas. Victor Olofsson is looking like their top line winger. That's fun. I mean, it's fun to watch. I don't know if it's going to work well for them, but a part of me does smile seeing Olofsson and Eichel reunited. I don't know why, but part of me does smile. So I am rooting for Vic. I hope it works out there. I guess we'll see how that goes. But I think other than that, that's going to do it for this episode. My throat is killing me. JP and Christian, please come back. I don't like doing these by myself. Feels like I'm speaking to the void. There's nobody in front of me right now, even though people are listening to this. Feels weird. Don't like doing this by myself. It's Jesus. I mean, it's the Sabre Roundtable, right? There's no round. It's an empty roundtable. There's hardly I don't need a table. I'm just speaking into a mic. Come back, guys, please. So, jokes aside, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you guys very much for listening. Looking ahead here, as I said, the Sabres kick off their preseason on Saturday night versus the Pittsburgh Penguins home at Buffalo. Their next game is also in Buffalo against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Their next game is on the 24th on Tuesday, Thursday the 26th against Ottawa, then on Saturday versus the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then their last preseason game is against the Red Wings on Monday, September 30th. Their exhibition game against Red Bull is on Friday, September 27th. So I don't know if I'm trying to remember. I feel like I saw it quickly. I want to say they're leaving for Europe on Tuesday. I could be wrong. But if that's the case, my guess is the NHL lineup plays Saturday and then Monday. So they get 2 games against NHL teams, leave for Europe, play that exhibition game on Friday, and then, then they get to rest and wait until the following week when they kick things off against the Devils. So I would guess we get the mostly Amherst, the Rochester squad, Tuesday the 24th against Pittsburgh, Thursday the 26th against Ottawa, Saturday the 28th against Columbus, and then Monday the 30th versus the Red Wings. So I could be wrong. I know they're leaving at some point next week, so stay tuned. Don't quote me 100% on that. I just feel like I saw it Tuesday, but no clue. I don't have their travel schedule. So I don't know exactly when we'll talk to you again. Maybe next Wednesday. That way we have like 3 games to talk about. Maybe we'll talk Tuesday night after the conclusion of the Pittsburgh game. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll get JP in for a cameo. He's basically gone until, for anybody that misses him dearly, which I miss him too. I think he'll be back for the next few weeks, and then once we get closer to the end of October, he'll have to be gone again. But then after that, then I think he'll be back full-time for the full ride of the season. So if anybody thinks he's been slacking, I mean, I agree. He should make more appearances than he has been, but who am I to judge? He's got more important things going on. So, and then Christian should be back. This was a one-time thing. Like I said, he's moving. He's also doing adult things, unlike me. So we'll talk to you guys next week. Stay tuned for our final episode of Sabres versus the Atlantic. We'll be pitting them up against the Florida Panthers, which I think we know how that comparison's going to go. But there is still interesting stuff to talk about. That Florida defense did see, obviously, a big departure. So we'll wait to discuss it. Until then, Jesse should be joining Christian and I once more, this time to dump on the other Florida team. So I think other than that, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys very much for listening and or watching on YouTube. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at the Sabre Report. Also on Instagram, at TikTok at the Sabre Report. Feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube. Also like and share. If you want updates for the pod, you can follow us at Sabre Report Pod. The Bills are 2-0, and what better way than to get excited for that than giving our friends over at the Buffalo Sports Talk podcast a listen. Max and Ryan have been doing great stuff as this season has been kicking into high gear, so feel free to go give that a listen. Also, I am in the process of editing the prospect pyramid. I did not forget about that. I am in my final stages. Maybe I'll put that out this weekend, maybe on like Sunday, sort of as a buffer until the next episode of this and Sabres Versus. I don't know. It's a content crunch right now. I'm trying to get myself into the full swing of the season, and we'll see how that goes. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, once again, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, go Sabres.